Good afternoon. My name is Ces Butner, and I have the honor to serve as this year's president of Rotary Club of Oakland. Founded in 1908, the Rotary Club of Oakland is the third oldest Rotary Club of some 35,000 Rotary clubs throughout the world. We are a community of 300 men and women from all walks of Oakland's civic, to Rotary's motto of service above self. I'd like to welcome you to our 5,342nd club meeting. For over 111 years, we have welcomed Rotarians and guests from around the world to our club meetings. We continue to do so virtually during COVID, and soon, as we'll be right here from the California Ballroom. Once again, we're here today testing the California Ballroom experience with our virtual environment. So bear with us as we get ready for the in-person meeting in June. And many thanks once again to our AV team, co-chaired by Jack Isles and Sandeepa Nayak, who have worked tirelessly this year to help our Rotary Club of Oakland #3 continue our meeting format. So if you're a visiting Rotarian or if you're a guest of a Rotarian, please let us know by typing your name and the name of your club into the chat box located at the center bottom of the screen you're viewing now. By doing so, we will be able to recognize you later in this meeting. Also, we recommend that all participants view this Zoom meeting by clicking the speaker view button located in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. And if you have comments throughout the meeting or questions for the speaker, please use the chat button at the bottom of the screen for that as well. And now for our thought for the day, Rotarian Gail Uilkema.
Hello, I have 3 quick quotations today. First of all, don't let yesterday take up too much of today. Will Rogers. The way I see it, if you want the rainbow, you got to put up with the rain. Dolly Parton. And lastly, sometimes you will never know the value of the moment until it becomes a memory. Dr. Seuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail, for setting the tone for our meeting with those reflective, inspiring thoughts. Because we want to remain grounded and focused, we begin our meetings by jointly reciting our vision, which is, together, we see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves. Hope you enjoyed last week's meeting, which featured Shooty Babbitt, speaking about an inspiration to kids to really get involved in their life and his long career in the sports field with the A's. This week, we have further testing of the ballroom meeting experience, anticipating our first meeting on June 17th. Jesse will email all the protocols, but they will be, in short, an abundance of caution will require proof of vaccination, like other large indoor gatherings, kind of like Chase Center when we go to the Warrior game. Additionally, we will not serve a lunch at the first few meetings or the initial meeting, buffet or box, but you are welcome to bring your own lunch. We will be providing drinks, coffee, tea, water, and have, if they finish the bar out here, we'll have wine at the bar. So get your vaccination card or a picture of it on your phone together in anticipation of the June 17th meeting in person. My one in-person non-Zoom meeting as Rotary president. You won't want to miss it. It'll be a great time for everybody to get back together. So, one other thing. One other protocol I want to make sure you're aware of is don't Zoom the meeting inside the in-person meeting. And cannot have you get on the California Ballroom Wi-Fi. We're seeking to make sure we have the bandwidth to perform this meeting. So sit back and enjoy another in our great Civic Thursday meetings where you can catch a great speaker and get involved in Rotary, where service above self exists. Past District Governor Ed Jelen, do we have any visiting Rotarians or guests?
Hey, President Ces, let me take a look out there and see if there are any. Oh, yeah. CJ Hirschfeld brought a guest today, whose name is Princess Allen. Princess is on the Parks and Rec Advisory Commission and a former RILA youth attendee. RILA is one of Rotary's premier leadership organizations for young men and women. So it's always nice to see a RILA grad make it in public service. And that's our guest today, President Ces.
Thank you. And welcome to our guests. I should say all my guests are guests. And thank you, Ed, for welcoming the guests. DEI co-chair, Greg Knight. I believe you have a special reintroduction of one of our longtime members.
I do. Thank you, President Ces. Fellow Rotarians, it is my great pleasure as we embark on Pride Month to reintroduce to you Rotarian Barbara Beery. Barbara joined Rotary in March 1994, and we are lucky she did. Barbara's journey to Rotary began when Michael Kraft, one of the first women to join Rotary, introduced and invited her to the club. Barbara met her when Michael headed up the New York Life Office here in Oakland. Barbara was interviewed for membership first by the illustrious judge, John Cooper, and Barbara couldn't glean enough information about being a member of Rotary as a woman and as a lesbian. So luckily, during a lunch with Carl Stuckey, Barbara discovered that Rotary shared her values and that world community service fit with her commitment to charitable work and love of travel. So, in Barbara's words, she took a gamble and joined Rotary. As an attorney and CPA, Barbara's initial connection to Rotary was as a professional and a business owner. But as time went on, the most important connection for her has been the long-lasting relationships developed with other Rotarians over the last 27 years. She participated in Uniendo Americas, co-founded by Carl Stuckey and Juan Forrester, which facilitates relationships and service partnerships among clubs across the globe. The renowned service project in Paquila, Guatemala, is an example of such partnership. Through that relationship with Carl, she accepted the opportunity to lead the group study exchange program in France, and then served on the District 5170 Endowment Board. And the trip to Ghana to help eradicate polio was life-changing for Barbara. Working with the Bombay Queen City Club in Mumbai, India, she has brought 4 global grants to the World Community Service Committee. Barbara has found committee service to be a great way to develop relationships. She chaired the classification committee. She served as a youth mentor on Interact, the Cerrone Lena Scholarship Committee, the Enterprise Institute, Kinder Prep, and Community Service Committee. That inspired her to resurrect our club speech contest in 2015 with Debo Sarkar, and then last year, Alex Kafka joined her as co-chair. These relationships supercharged this committee. Additionally, Barbara served as a board member of the Rotary Club of Oakland, as well as the Oakland Rotary Endowment. Barbara said she couldn't possibly name all of the people in each of these committees and boards who means so much to her. Earlier, I mentioned Pride Month. Barbara relayed to me that when she joined Rotary, she had no agenda and no intention to come in waving the rainbow flag. Because being lesbian is only one aspect of who she is as a person. As fellow Rotarians and she got to know each other, she found that this aspect came forward organically. Rotarians welcomed her relationship with Phyllis, her partner at the time, and their 2 daughters. One daughter still resides here in Oakland, and the other in Seattle. When Phyllis died in 2004, after 28 years of being Barbara's domestic partner, Barbara says Rotary was her extended family. Barbara's pastor had recommended no more than 50 bulletins for Phyllis's memorial, but Daniel Chang offered to print 300, and they still ran out. Barbara is sure that Rotary Friends were the largest contingent at the service. She specifically remembers President-elect Dudley Thompson having to stand at the back due to no empty seats. Outside of Rotary, Barbara is passionate about meditation and studying Sanskrit. She likes to stay fit, practicing Hatha yoga and swimming. Did you know that Barbara is a gold medal swimmer? I was surprised when I learned that. Barbara was named Most Inspirational Manatee by Manatee Aquatic Masters, her swim team at the time, for her medal sweep, a gold, silver, and 2 bronze medals at the 2014 International Gay Games 9 in Cleveland, Ohio. In the 2018 Gay Games 10 in Paris, she won 1 gold, 4 silver, and 1 bronze medals. And she is aiming for the 2022 Hong Kong Gay Games 11. There's so much more to Barbara Beery that I could tell you about, but that's all the time I have allotted. So at this time, I'd like to do 2 things. I'd like to be first to ring the bell for Barbara, and I would like Barbara to come forward for some closing comments.
Well, I'm moved to tears at the history and the relationships that I have had in Rotary. Rotary means so much to me. So I'll just embarrass myself and thank you all.
By the way, Greg, you were not the first to ring the bell.
Oh, you know what? I've gone over this in practice, but when I actually started it, it was very emotional today, Barbara. So thank you so much. And thank you for letting me be the one to reintroduce you. And I guess I'm second to ring the bell or third, but I'm happy to ring the bell for you.
Thank you.
President says we cannot hear you. We cannot hear the ballroom.
Committee. Did I hear him? Pat, go ahead, Pat.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, President Ces. Last year, I heard that pickleball was the fastest growing sport in the country. Early this year, I decided to look into it. I took a 2-hour clinic, started playing regularly, and now I know why pickleball is so popular. It's a blast, even for a beginner like me. I invite you to check it out. The High Adventure Committee has arranged a pickleball clinic on Saturday, June 12th at the Bushrod Park tennis courts at Shattuck Avenue and 59th Street. Street parking is ample. Equipment is provided. All you need to do is show up in tennis shoes or other athletic shoes and be prepared to pay the instructor, Darlene, $10. Darlene will run 2 sessions, one from 10 a.m. to noon and the other from noon to 2 p.m. Each session can accommodate 16 persons. Through this Sunday, June 6th, registration is available only to Oakland Rotary members and friends. After Sunday, Darlene will open it up to her waiting list. The 10 a.m. session is already half full, so these sessions will fill up. If you're interested, go to the club website calendar and sign up now. Contact me if you have questions. And on a totally different subject, new member orientation. We have a large and active club, and we want to provide new members an overview of the club's many moving parts. If you join the club during Cess's year and haven't yet attended orientation, now is the time. You may select from one of 2 sessions, both via Zoom. This coming Tuesday, June 8th at noon, or the following Tuesday, June 15th at 5 p.m. Send me a note in the chat indicating your preferred session, and I'll sign you up. You also may go to the website calendar and sign up there. If neither session works, let me know and we'll figure something out. I look forward to seeing you newer members. Thanks, President Cess.
Thank you, Pat, for all you have done for us in the past and currently. I enjoy working with you as ED at the first half of my year. And to all those new members, she's going to have a great orientation. So you make sure you sign up for one of those orientations that she had just mentioned. Rotarian Stephen Blair, you have a presentation on our new Sorority Lena participants, recipient.
Thank you, President Cess. And I apologize for the noise going on behind me. So today is my pleasure to introduce you to most of our 2021 Sorority Lena scholars. This year we were able to fund scholarships for 10 of Oakland's top students, and coupled with Oakland Promise, provide mentors for each of them as they go through college. These are impressive students who, despite significant obstacles in their education, have excelled in areas both in and out of the classroom. And I'm not going to take any more of the time. I'm going to turn it over to the students themselves. So first we'll have Alexa Acevedo tell us about her high school and where she's going to college and what she plans to study.
Hi, so my name is Alexa Acevedo. I graduated from Skyline High School, and I plan to attend CSU Long Beach, and I plan to major in marketing.
Thank you. And next we'll have Victoria Bala. I hope I get the name right.
Oh, yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Victoria Mabala. I just graduated from Oakland Tech and plan to attend UC Berkeley for computer science. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you. Next would be David Huang.
Hello, everyone. My name is David, and I graduated from Oakland High School. I'm planning to attend UC Santa Barbara, majoring in physics.
Okay. There he is. Okay. And then following David is Mia Pollard.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mia Pollard. I just graduated from Oakland High School as well, and I will be attending UCLA in the fall, majoring in electrical engineering.
And then Pablo Lamanelli, Jr.
Hello, my name is Pablo Lamanelli, Jr. I just graduated from Lighthouse Community Charter High School, and I will be attending UC Berkeley next fall.
Great. And then Ioana Cruz, or Ioana Mendoza.
Hello, everyone. My name is Juana Mendoza, and I just graduated from Fremont High School, and I will be going to UC Berkeley undeclared.
Okay. And I believe Thoa Nijin is on here.
Hi, my name is Twa Win, and I'm very grateful to be attending this meeting. Unfortunately, my camera isn't working, so I'll just be speaking like this. But to start, I recently graduated from Oakland Technical High School, and now I'm currently an incoming freshman at UC San Diego and plan on majoring in cognitive science with a specialization in design and interaction.
Okay. Ian Perlick.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ian Perchlick, and I also graduated from Skyline High School, and I will be attending the University of Michigan. I am not sure what I'm studying yet.
I want to say just about Ian that when he interviewed with us, he had just played football the day before and had broken his arm, and he still made it to the interview. It was very impressive. And finally, Elijah Waller.
Hi, I just graduated from Skyline High School, and I will be attending UCLA for Design Media Arts.
So welcome to you all to Oakland Rotary. We're just impressed with all of you. The interviews were fantastic. Just a very impressive group of kids. And we look forward to keeping track of you and following you through your education as you go. And also, just for your information, we have started an internship program for the summer. And this year we placed 7 kids in internships. So that's one benefit that you get from being one of the Rotary Scholars. So best wishes to you all as you go forward. And to the Rotarians out there, we can always use more mentors. And you can see these are just super great kids to get to know and follow as they go through school and learn from them and maybe help them a little bit. So with that, I'll turn it back over to President Ces. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. We really appreciate that. And thank you, all of you Cerrone Lena scholarship recipients for this year. Let's give them a round of applause. I know it's difficult, but Stephen is looking for some mentors still yet. We would like to get a couple of mentors for this year's crew, our 10 recipients that you have here. I think we need one more mentor, I think is what we need. Is that right, Stephen? Somewhere around there.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
All right. So if you want to be a mentor to one of these lovely kids, make sure you get in touch with Stephen Blair, and we'll fulfill our responsibility as Cerrone Lena scholars and us being the mentors for those scholars. President-elect Dudley Thompson, will you do us the honor of introducing this week's Civic Thursday speaker?
Thank you, President Ces, fellow Rotarians, and honored guests. It's my pleasure and honor today to welcome Dr. Bernard Schleger. Dr. Schleger, he goes by Bernie, so feel free to address him that way, I believe. He is Associate Professor of Historical and Cultural Studies at Pacific School of Religion. I'm going to say that's one of my alma maters. It's in Berkeley, part of the Graduate Theological Union on the north side of the Cal campus. Particular for today, he is also the Executive Director of the Center for Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, Transgender, Queer, and Gender Studies, LGBTQ and Gender Studies in Religion, which is associated with Pacific School of Religion. Dr. Schleger received his PhD from Yale in History and Medieval and Latin American Christianity. He's also taught at the University of New Hampshire, Trinity College, Middlebury College, and Yale. He was one of the original staff members at CLGS when it was founded in 2000. Since then, he's held a number of positions before becoming the executive director in 2009. In addition, he currently directs the development and advancement work of CLGS, which offers PSR certificate in sexuality and religion. His research interests include queer studies, the history of Christianity, LGBTQ pastoral care, and medieval and social religious history. I would also add, although his topic, I hope there'll be a lot of questions over his topic today, but I hope there's questions about the center too. One of the very interesting things about the center is Dr. Schleger's been developing a series of, I'll call them monographs, called 52 Ways to Expand Your Welcome to LGBTQ plus people and our families. Dr. Schleger, welcome to Oakland Rotary.
Thank you so much, Dudley. I will share my screen if that's doable here. See if I can get myself situated here. Hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, again, so my name is Bernie Schlager. As Dudley said, I teach at Pacific School of Religion and direct the Center for LGBTQ and Gender Studies in Religion. And we are celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. So really thrilled to be with you today. I did want to make mention of my own appreciation for Rotary International. One of my siblings is a medical doctor. She and her husband do a lot of work in San Pedro Sula in Honduras, and Rotary International in Honduras supports their work, which includes working with young people seeking shelter and in recovery programs. So I'm really pleased to be here today. Happy Pride Month to all of you. And since this is June, and the title for my brief presentation today is The Council on Religion and the Homosexual, a California contribution to LGBTQ liberation before Stonewall. This is not to take anything away from the Stonewall Riots, which took place in the city of New York in 1969 in the summer. It is often listed as one of the main events in what used to be called gay, lesbian, but now queer pride. The Stonewall Riots took place at a tavern in Greenwich Village in New York City. It was spurred by transgender, Black, and women of color who were tired of the oppression that they continued to experience and continue to experience today, but especially in the city of New York at that time. And they fought back against the police who were attempting to close the bar down and to take them into custody. So nothing against Stonewall, but it's important, I think, for us here in California to realize aspects of our own queer history, and especially here in the San Francisco Bay Area. The Council on Religion and the Homosexual is really an important aspect of United States LGBTQ history. So by way of an introduction, it will not come as news to any of you, I think, that for LGBTQ or queer people, and there's a complicated relationship or history with the religion of Christianity. I know Christianity best among world religions, and that is the focus of my own research and study. And so let me provide some context for this. Although queer people, of course, have always been present in Christian churches, in Christian denominations, in Christian history, they've been leaders, we have been spiritual guides, we've been part of the rank and file of every denomination in Christianity for the past 2,000 years. It's really, especially since the later medieval period in the 12th and 13th century, that LGBTQ or queer people have been especially persecuted and really seen as the other or as the sinner, or even as an enemy of church, and then subsequently then of the state. And this is certainly true. And at our seminary, Pacific School of Religion, we happen to be the oldest Protestant seminary west of the Mississippi River. Well over half of our student body identifies as queer, many of whom are studying to be ministers or priests or religious leaders. The topic of queer identities and Christianity comes up often because many people have complicated and difficult and painful history with Christianity. It is sometimes assumed, in fact, that all Christian denominations or all churches are anti-queer, and that is not true, even though it is a difficult history. So today I'd like to share with you a fascinating part of Bay Area history, and that is the Council on Religion and the Homosexual. And so when we consider the history of welcoming Christianity, that's a term that's often used for churches or denominations or movements within the larger Christian world that welcome and include LGBTQ people. And so the Council on Religion and Homosexual, founded in the city of San Francisco in the early 1960s, played a key role in the overall history of Christianity and queer identities and queer sexualities. It was founded in San Francisco, across the bay, in 1964. And it was really one of the very first, I would say really the first group that was publicly, openly dedicated to creating social change, for the term at that time was homosexuals, in US churches and within society at large. And so an important legacy of Christianity in the United States is that there are many social movements in our history as a nation that have deep involvement and in fact have often been spurred on by Christians. That's not surprising, but let me just list a few of them. I'm moving my screen around here. The Abolitionist Movement that came to power, especially in the early 19th century, was a movement led by Christians. It was a movement led by members of Black Christian churches who had set their sights on freedom, and they interpreted this most often, and they led the charge for freedom through a lens of Christian identity and Christian interpretation. Black Christianity in the early 19th century was a mix of many different religious traditions, many coming over from Africa. And there is no one form of Christianity. And that's why I often use in my teaching and research and writing a plurality for Christianities. The Abolitionist Movement was one social movement that had profound involvement of Christians in it. The Temperance Movement was led by Christian women, in fact, largely by Methodist women, but by others as well. This led to eventually prohibition, which lasted for several years in the United States. Many labor movements in the United States have had the involvement of Christian pastors and laity. The Civil Rights Movement in the 20th century, Martin Luther King and Bayard Rustin and many others were identified strongly with Christianity. The Catholic Worker Movement is another founded by the lay Catholic Dorothy Day. The Farm Worker Movement, Dolores de la Huerta and Cesar Chavez and others had profound connections to Christian churches, to Catholicism primarily. And then in the 1980s, the migrant sanctuary movements that took place primarily in Arizona, but elsewhere, were spurred on by Christians. What's often thought, though, is that Christian churches and denominations played no role in what used to be called gay liberation, that somehow all Christians were enemies of LGBTQ people. And that's simply not true. And that's why I want to share with you just briefly a bit of the history of the Council on Religion and the Homosexual. And then the 20th century is pivotal in any history of queer identities, not only in California, but in the United States and throughout the world. And let me say something about that. The historian John D'Amelio has coined the term that World War II served as a national coming out experience. It's often said that women and men in the United States Armed Forces who identified as lesbian or homosexual or gay or trans found one another in these same gender environments. And at the end of the Second World War, you may well know, there were many lesbian and gay service members who were discharged, often dishonorably, because of their homosexual identity. They were allowed to serve during the war, but afterwards they were kicked out. Many of them settled in port cities such as San Francisco, New York, and others, Seattle, Los Angeles, which then developed significant gay and lesbian queer communities. And it's during the late 1940s and into the 1950s that we have the expanding formation of homosexual, gay, trans, lesbian, bi, and queer identities, both as individuals and as communities. And there are literally thousands of gay neighborhoods in large and small cities across the United States that develop and come to their apex, I guess you could say, following the Second World War. Of course, if we look at the Harlem Renaissance, the Black Renaissance of the city area of Harlem in the 1920s would be a primary example. Another would be the French Quarter in New Orleans, and then in San Francisco, we could look at North Beach. So these are some of the ways in which LGBTQ or queer people began to identify themselves, not only individually, but as communities interested in effecting change. And a lot was happening in the 1950s and 60s in the San Francisco Bay Area. The founding of the Mattachine Society in Los Angeles in 1950 was an important historical development. It was a group of homosexual men who organized in 1950 at a time when homosexuality was considered illegal, when it was considered a mental illness. And they formed a group to attempt to change laws and social policy. Homophile was the name that was used in the 1950s. Here in the Bay Area in San Francisco, the Daughters of Bilitis were founded in 1955 as a lesbian organization that becomes national, as well as the Mattachine Society. You may well know of the history of the Tavern Guild in San Francisco, which was a joining together of gay and lesbian bars in the city that the owners were tired of having them shut down and having to pay bribes to the mafia and to the police. They were an effective homophile organization, as was the Society for Individual Rights. And the Mattachine Society founded the first national newsletter. It was called One in 1953, and the latter was founded by the Daughters of Bilitis in 1955. The 1950s turned out to be really an important decade for the history of queer communities in the United States. And one important book that was published in 1951 was a book known as The Homosexual in America. And in this book, its author, a pen name was Daniel Webster Corey, began to write in a way that had never been read before, at least in public, and speaking about the importance of having the voice of homosexual people, you might call them queer people, to be listened to for their own experience. That not only should people in society listen to psychiatrists or to lawyers or to judges or to people in church, but to listen to the experience of queer people themselves. And an important quote from this book is when Corey says, quote, "We who are homosexual are a minority, not only numerically, but also as a result of a caste-like status in society." And this is a fascinating claim, which one could debate, but important claim. Corey goes on to say, quote, "Our minority status is similar in a variety of respects to that of national, religious, and other ethnic groups. In the denial of civil liberties, in the legal, extra-legal, and quasi-legal discrimination, in the assignment of an inferior social position, in the exclusion from the mainstream of life and culture." Let me just move on here to focus on thinking of my time, to bring it right to the Bay Area. An important player in the founding of the Council on Religion and Homosexual is Glide Memorial Church. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this important Christian community. It's in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco. Founded as a Methodist church, has recently become an independent church, still identifies as Christian and undertakes a variety of social service and religious programs. So looking at the history then of Glide Memorial Church, in 1962, the board at Glide Memorial Church hired an individual by the name of Reverend Louis Durham, who in turn hired 3 young ministers, a person named Ted McElvenna, Cecil Williams, who is still connected, along with Cecil's spouse, Janice Miracatani, and Don Kuhn. And these young ministers were given the job of expanding the programs of what was known then as the Glide Urban Center. And so keep in mind here, I mentioned before gay neighborhoods. The Tenderloin district of San Francisco, already this was being noticed by the public in the early to mid 1940s, was a neighborhood that had many homosexual residents and many sex workers, a very significant percentage of whom were young homosexual men. And Reverend Ted McElvenna, who just died a few years ago, developed a ministry of street outreach to homosexuals, which was probably one of the first of its kind anywhere in the world. And meeting these young homosexual people who were homeless, many of whom were sex workers, McElvenna came up with the idea of convening leaders of homosexual communities and clergy to discuss the situation of gay and lesbian people in the Tenderloin district specifically, but by larger connection, the term was used, the plight of homosexuals in US societies in the early 1960s. McIlvenna received permission or support from the Methodist leadership, and the result of this was the first gathering of Christian clergy and homosexual leaders to discuss the situation of homosexual persons in society and the church. And so what took place then from May 31st to June 2nd, right around this time of year in 1964, was a retreat at something known as the White Memorial Conference Center in Mill Valley, California. The building is still there, but it's no longer a retreat center. And so the goals of the retreat were as follows. They may not seem mind-blowing to us today, but in 1964, they were very significant. One of the goals stated was the gathering was to be a search for mutual understanding between these homosexual leaders and these Christian clergy. Secondly, and this is very important, I think, that no one in attendance had special access to the truth. This gathering was not to have Christian clergy tell queer people how they should live their lives, but rather the intention was to have an open discussion among all present. And although this might seem somewhat remarkable for us today to have to be said, it was important for this committee to state, and these are all direct quote, that homosexuals were no less human than heterosexuals, and not all homosexuals were godless individuals who lived miserable lives. So if you keep in mind in the early 1960s, for many queer people, the position of Christian churches were that homosexuals were sinners, that they lived miserable lives, that they did not believe in God, and that the only way for churches to interact with homosexuals was as sinners in need of repentance and reform. And then a fourth goal of the retreat was that acceptance into the church would benefit homosexual persons and their relationships. That was their point of view. And so let me just read a few quotes here. I'm mindful of my time that come from the minutes of this meeting. The first comes from Billy Talmadge, who was one of the founders of the Daughters of Bilitis. And this is what was put into the minutes. Billy says, sex is a God-given force. To repress or deny it is an affront to God. Is this being a Christian? What of the voice of the wilderness, which belongs to the homosexual? And in speaking about the tension that many queer people lived in the 1960s, Talmadge also says, no one can survive such a schism between church and society being queer. To retain sanity, the homosexual must forego the organized approach to God. Another quote here from a founder of the Mattachine Society, which you remember is this first gay men's organization that was founded in the early 1950s. A quote from Lucas in the minutes, the homosexual is a human being. He has a soul and Christ consciousness, just as do all other human beings. They love, live, have feelings and emotions, which are really no different from their so-called heterosexual counterpart. Conflict occurs when religion presents to them a picture which represents them as perverse. And then another quote saying that the duty of this committee was to begin to help slay the monster of the crime against nature that homosexuality was depicted as. And so the early work of the Council of Religion and the Homosexual following this retreat was quite significant. You may know something about the history of the 1965 New Year's Eve dance. This was held in a major hotel downtown for gay and lesbian people. It was announced publicly. The Council on Religion and Homosexual put advertisements in the newspapers of the city. And the police responded by posting outside the doors of California Hall a police presence, and they photographed every person who went in and out of the building as a way to intimidate those who were in attendance. This backfired on the police because the ministers of the Council on Religion and Homosexual then used this as an example to publicize the ways in which queer people were being persecuted within San Francisco. The Council on Religion also published a book called A Brief of Injustices, an indictment of our society and its treatment of the homosexual. and printed thousands of copies of this, which then were distributed throughout the country. The Council on Religion and the Homosexual was the first queer organization to appear yearly at the California State Fair. They had a booth called Every 10th Person is a Homosexual, based on some of the stats from the Kinsey report. And they were out there, and they held conferences in Seattle, Dallas, and Washington, D.C. And very importantly, members of the Council on Religion and the Homosexual in the mid to late 1960s met with officials from the Lutheran Church in America, the United Church of Christ, United Methodist churches, and Episcopal churches. And wisely, they were able to access mainstream media. They published in Harper's Magazine, in Look Magazine, and even had an appearance on CBS television. Okay, so let me wrap up here and just say, what was the impact of the Council on Religion and the Homosexual? As I say, it was formed before two other very important events in queer history in the United States. One is the Compton Cafeteria Riot in Los Angeles in 1965, which was a riot largely spurred by trans individuals and community down at a cafeteria in Los Angeles, and then the Stonewall Riots. It's often forgotten that these two events, the Compton Cafeteria Riot and the Stonewall Riots, were largely spurred and begun by trans women of color and Black trans women. That's often forgotten and whitewashed, quite literally. So the Council on Religion and the Homosexual continued its work, and perhaps the most important of its work were its annual conferences. And it lasted up until the early 70s, because at that point, there was a real shift that took part among queer Christian advocacy groups. The Council on Religion and the Homosexual was what was known as an ecumenical group, open to all Christian groups. Beginning in the 70s, individuals within specific Christian denominations began to advocate and organize and work for social change within individual denominations. So in many denominations, these what are called gay and lesbian caucuses are founded. United Church of Christ, Unitarians, Episcopalians, United Methodists, Quakers, Brethren, Mennonites, Seventh-day Adventists. And so that is a very brief history of the CRH, which, as I say, was founded in 1964 as the first organization in the United States and probably the world that brought together leaders of lesbian, gay, what were known as homophile organizations, and individuals from Christian denominations to begin to work for change for queer people within the San Francisco Bay Area, within California, and then the United States at large. So let me end there and see if there are any questions. I have not paid attention to the chat, but I will take a look there now.
Okay, we will, I think we have a few questions for you. Jackie, I think, is handling the question and answers today. Jackie, do we have any questions for our guest, Bernard? Bernie, I guess you want to be called, but Bernie, you want to be called.
Well, President Seth, I don't see any questions, but I see where there's a bell ringer in the chat room.
Okay, well, does anyone have a question? I could open up the floor. Now we can see who wants to raise your hand. If you got a question, we'll address a question to Bernie.
Could you talk about Buddhist and Jewish queer folk?
Okay, we got a question from President-elect Dudley. What was it?
What about Jewish and Buddhist queer folk?
Jewish and Buddhist queer folk. Could you talk about them?
Yes, and let me, before I do that, let me answer one of the comment, make a comment on one of the items in the chat, if I might. So from Harold, it seems that the Black queer community has been at the forefront of the queer community gaining civil liberties. What benefits have Black queers received as a result of their efforts? I think it's an excellent question. As often happens, we know in US media, the contributions of Black people and communities, Black queer communities, I would say, especially Black trans community members, has simply been left out and whitewashed. There has been a rewriting of, in some ways, of Stonewall and Compton cafeteria riots. to place in their rightful place Black queer individuals in the community who actually led these events. And so that's being redressed, I think, slowly today in the writing of queer history. And what's most important, I think, is that history is written from the communities themselves, right? So we have increasing numbers of Black and people of color, BIPOC scholars and community activists who are reclaiming this history, and we're learning so much from them. And then Dudley, to your question around Jewish and Buddhist contributions, yes, there were gay and lesbian synagogues founded. Beit Simchat Torah in New York City was founded. Shahar Zahav was founded in the 1970s. So an important aspect of organizing has been the founding of religious communities dedicated in large part to queer membership. And we see that with gay and lesbian queer synagogues. And certainly that's true of Buddhist sanghas. There are a number of movements in the early to the mid 1970s right here in the Bay Area, especially among Buddhists of color in Oakland in particular, and elsewhere, who began to form sanghas that were completely open to queer members and often focused on queer membership. I'll pay attention to that.
Jackie.
Here's one question from Joycey Mack. Is Dr. Archie Smith still affiliated with the Divinity School?
Archie retired about 7 years ago from PSR. He was our longest serving faculty member at the time. And you're right, he taught pastoral care and was also a counselor.
Are there any other questions for our speaker today?
Barbara Beery, you have a question.
It's more a thank you. The Council on CRH was actually extremely helpful. The research that you had done and the writings that you had produced were extremely supportive. My particular church had a gay pastor, which was in direct violation of the Evangelical Lutheran Church's rules, did not allow that. And so eventually dealing with the struggles of having to be in the closet and you know, here he's a pastor and he's not being honest and forthright, and that was just too much for him. So he came out and he was brought up on trial, and he was in fact defrocked, but that was just one step of the process to eventually change all of the policies now of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. I was personally involved in speeches at various churches exploring the idea of becoming reconciled in Christ churches, saying we welcome LGBTQ here in our congregation. So thank you for being part of that.
Yeah, and thank you, Barbara. Thank you for your work. Having grown up in the Midwest, I grew up in a sea of Lutherans. And to brag a little bit, we at Pacific School of Religion are very proud that a recent alum of ours, the Reverend Megan Rohr, is the first openly transgender bishop in the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America here in, I believe it's in Northern California, Nevada.
Yes.
Not conference, I forgot the word, but district.
Synod.
So,
The Synod.
So change happens.
Yes. Thank you for your part.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
We have another one, Jackie.
One last question. What role did the non-Christian women's suffrage movement have on equity for LGBTQT people?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say a couple of things. That's not my area of expertise, but it is known that there's a significant percentage of women in the suffragette movement of the early 20th century who were same gender loving women, even if they didn't use the term lesbian. Many we know were involved in what were known as Boston marriages. So I think it's interesting to think about that and the fact that we had same gender loving women who were at the forefront of the suffragette and the suffragist movement.
Thank you, Bernie, for being our speaker today. This year, our club is making let's give them a hand. You can hear it from inside the ballroom now.
Yeah, thank you. It was a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you for being our speaker today. This year, our club is making the homeless crisis in Oakland a priority. To that end, and as a gift to you for being our speaker for the day, In your honor, we are making a donation to support our unhoused residents in Oakland. Additionally, we would like to give you our Centennial book, which documents 100 years of service and friendship in the third oldest club in the Rotary world. Again, thank you, Bernard, or Bernie, for being our speaker today. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Rotarian Pat Williams, will you tell us about the speaker for our next Civic Thursday meeting?
Happy to, President Ces. Our speaker next week is Jonathan Becker. He is the president of the San Jose Sharks. I heard him a few months ago on a presentation about the business of sports done through the University of Virginia network, of which I'm part of. I thought he was fascinating. So I haven't heard for sure from his assistant what he is speaking about, but I believe he's going to speak about the current business of sports, particularly the changes that have come about from the pandemic. And I think he's going to be fantastic. I really enjoyed his energy when I heard him speak.
We'll have a all Zoom meeting, I think, next week. I have talked to President-elect Dudley, who will be running the meeting. I'll have to bid adieu. I won't be here next week, but the following week after that, we will have our first in-person meeting. So make sure you check out the email from Jesse, which describes the protocol, all the protocols that we'll have to assume for this. And June 15th, the governor has told us that he will possibly lift all restrictions. So, but we'll still be following our protocols in an abundance of caution for our meeting. So next meeting, all Zoom meeting, the meeting after that, in-person meeting, we'll be looking forward to both of those. Jesse, before I wrap up this meeting, do we have any bell ringers?
President says we have 19 bell ringers this week.
Wow, 19 bell ringers. Let me do them. Let me do the bells first, and then you can read the people.
Okay.
bells.
Make it 20.
Hey,
For Barbara.
He's gonna make it 20 for Barbara.
All right, so for Barbara, we had Dudley, Stephanie Kazenza, Jack McAvoy, yourself, Sandeepa, Ruth Stroop, Greg Knight, Marie, Linda and Jim Bosnecker, Wise Allen, Christine Watson, Peter Sherris, Linda Chu, Bob Breaker, Debo, and Alita Scala. Debo rang the bell again for the speech contest. And then Pauline Fox rang the bell for the Sorority Lena Scholarship students. Fred Morse rang the bell for Stephen Blair and the Sorority Lena Scholarship students. And Keith Urate rang the bell for the LGBTQ Rotary members of our club.
And I would like to ring the bell for Greg Knight. Thanks.
Thank you. One more ring of the bell. We got 21 rings of the bell for today. A great way to start the month of June in the LGBTQ month.
President says, Leanne asked, what does this bell ring mean?
Oh, the bell ring is $100 gift to the Oakland Rotary Endowment. Our endowment, we try to raise money for it, for all the good works that Oakland Rotary number 3 does. So I'd like to end this meeting as we always do. And that's the way it went at the 5,342nd club meeting on June the 3rd, 2021 at Oakland Rotary number 3, the third oldest Rotary club in the world. Everyone remember, Rotary opens opportunities for service above self. And for now, this meeting of the Rotary Club of Oakland is adjourned.